My name is Pamela Ban. I am a third-year PhD student here, and I study American politics. Our next panel is going to be on the state of the political media. Our first panelist is Marie Cox. She is a political columnist and senior political correspondent for MTV News. She started the political blog Wonkette in 2004 and also conducts the Talk interviews featured in the New York Times Magazine. We also have Wesley Morris. He's a journalist and critic at large for the New York Times. He was formerly a writer for Grantland and has written about film, fashion, and music, and won the Pulitzer Prize for Criticism in 2011 for his work at the Boston Globe. And then finally, we have Bryan Curtis, who is an editor-at-large at The Ringer, a new digital venture by Bill Simmons, and was previously a writer for Grantland, covering sports media and college football. He has also written for The Daily Beast, the New York Times Sports Magazine, and Slate.
Thanks.
And I'm here too.
Wait.
I'm here. I'm also here. I'm Bob Garfield. I'm a co-host of On the Media and about 17 other podcasts. And first of all, I want to say how great it is to be back at Harvard. You know, when I am here, the memories just flood back of my undergraduate days at Penn State. Also, it's really stimulating to be sitting here following panel after panel that have to do with data and research and scholarship and rigor. Forget all that shit, because the fact is that that most political analysis continues, at least where the public is concerned, to be delivered in the form of punditry by a combination of media elites and nakedly self-interested partisans. Cable TV and the politically inflected press are lousy with that sort of stuff, which means whatever portion of the public still actually seeks understanding must sift through conventional wisdom, just endless belaboring of the obvious, decontextualized data points, misinterpreted data, partisan propaganda, and quite a bit of blithering idiocy, just to find a few nuggets of actual insight. So today, ladies and gentlemen, I give you the blitherers.
Not us, right? I mean,
no. In fact, CAP populated this panel with folks who actually do attach rigor to their opinionating, their punditry, their analysis. Not counting me, I continue just to talk out of my ass. Can we play that clip?
The contest for the 2016 Republican nomination isn't a close horse race because, for now, it isn't a horse race at all. Just a lot of nags milling around the paddock. 32 candidates for one nomination to be decided a year from now. Never mind Skip Andrews, Kay Ross Newland, Kerry Bowers, Dale Christensen, and John DeMette Jr. Most voters have never heard of Scott Walker, Bobby Jindal, and Lindsey Graham. They have heard of Donald Trump, who has a lot of name recognition, like Justin Bieber, Al Sharpton, and gonorrhea.
Okay, so that was me dismissing Donald Trump's chances to win even a single primary back in July. And I guess I totally nailed that. And we could spend this entire panel discussing Donald Trump and all of our collective institutional mistakes in not seeing him coming. But let's please just begin by addressing a narrower question. Let's just assume that Donald Trump dominated the press coverage and all of our attention because apart from clicks and ratings, he's just so appallingly demagogic that it's our duty to document his outrages. So let's just put the best gloss on it from our point of view. But if, like Al Sharpton and Calvin Klein and Ann Coulter before him, his outrages were actually strategic, are we disserving our audiences by just feeding the trolls? Bryan?
The question presumes that anything a politician says is not strategic, that anything any politician says. I was reading Nate Silver's story in 538, how Donald Trump hacked the media, which I thought was very good. Every candidate is trying to hack the media. Obama has been trying to hack the media for 7 years and been doing quite a good job at it at times, right? I find the argument a little bit funny about cable news showing Donald Trump unplugged for so long, because we've said for years, we want cable news to show politicians talking, right? We don't want more pundits. Now we're in the weird position of saying, no, take Donald Trump off live and let the people argue with each other, which used to be the lowest common denominator of cable news. So I don't have this instinctive problem with that think we've overcovered it all that much.
Is it a self-correcting problem? If it's true that let's just say, as long as we're hypothesizing, that the campaign is finally going to begin a death spiral, right, after the abortion remarks and jailing women, or whatever it is. Who knows what the last outrage was.
Punishing them?
Punishing
sending
them,
to the
punishing them, yeah.
death penalty for, yes.
Yeah,
He didn't
orange
actually say it.
jumpsuits, I guess. But let's just say that is the beginning, as some of the polls are beginning to suggest, of some sort of spiraling vortex of doom for the Trump candidacy. Can we say like that Wikipedia, it's self-correcting, that our excesses have bred so much exposure that in the end truth or sanity will out? I mean, how are we supposed to know what to do with a guy like this?
I mean, I think that one problem in the coverage of Trump, I don't blame the media for Trump, except there's one particular way that he was covered that I wish that we had done differently, which is to say that we did cover the outrages, right? That was the thing that got everybody's blood boiling, whether you agreed or disagreed. And in the covering of the outrages, it did nothing to create any doubt for anyone. People who didn't like him just were proven that he's a jerk or demagogue. People who liked him just thought the media was biased for covering the outrages. I feel like the only thing that could have made a difference, I think it might be too late to make a difference now, if we had covered him as an idiot, and as someone whose policies and whose ideas are not in keeping with the shared reality that we all have. Like the things he wants to do as president.
Like the Constitution.
Like the Constitution, like the building the wall. Like it shouldn't be covered, like the idea he wants to keep out Muslims, yes, that's outrageous, but it's also impossible. You know, it's also like something you just can't do. Like the idea that he wants to deport 11 million people is logistically insane. Like it's like reporters had no trouble covering Bernie Sanders' policy proposals as though they were pie in the sky, college for everyone. These things are never going to happen. People are, that's a fantasy if you like that idea. But somehow Trump was covered as though we didn't pay attention to whether the policies themselves are workable. We just focused on the outrage, which is the one way to never, ever change someone's mind who's thinking about voting for him. No person that I know that is sympathetic to Trump is going to be swayed by my saying, "What, weren't you offended?"
But if you say to them, oh, by the way, according to that thing called the separation of powers, no president has the power to do what Trump is saying he's going to do.
Right.
I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. No.
Right,
No,
and that you
you
can't
aren't.
build that wall, and that you can't deport all these people.
I also think that he's been miscovered in the sense that the story, I don't know. I happen to be one of those people who's not surprised by any of this. And this is something that I kind of emailed you about, which is who actually is doing the covering of Trump. Mm-hmm. I don't think if you had more people of color in the media itself, covering the news, I just think the angle on that story would have been slightly different. I think black people could smell this virus in 2007. And it was only a matter of time until the lab created the perfect, this is like the end of, like the end of any superhero movie. The thing that starts out as Jeff Bridges at the beginning of the movie winds up this like giant, disgusting, toxified special effect by the end. And it's going to take all the Avengers to destroy this thing as it destroys New York.
Yeah, you get a lot of white people like, what could all these other white people be angry about? What is the thing that's driving all this anger? And then I think, if you had people of color in the media, they're not confused.
It's not a mystery. It is not mysterious at all that we aren't afraid to say racism at all.
Yeah.
And I also think that, I think Trump is like, he's a perfect storm in a lot of ways. I think one of the other things that helped create this person, let me go back to my actual point, which was that people sort of talk about the brilliance of Donald Trump and like what a strategic genius he might be, and how he's managed to last this long as though this were some plan for him. This was no plan. He can't even believe he's still around. He really can't believe. This is like Marissa Tomei winning the Oscar.
Yeah.
Nobody, she couldn't believe she won. She still can't. I just feel like the thing that keeps him going is not Donald Trump, it's the voters. And I think that there's been a real disconnect between the way the media covers that campaign and the way they don't cover the people making it happen. Which in some ways is the media, but also like there are sizable numbers of people voting for him. And it's been interesting to hear the data experts talk about the truth and the falseness of some of those numbers, but they're real enough to keep him, they're significant enough to keep him alive.
It's certainly true that, I think some of the reasons, some of it, we started laughing about him because he was such a buffoon and because he was so, manifestly a jerk. And in some cases even delusional. Remember, this all started, his national political career began with him talking about birthers, birthing Obama's citizenship. And then the phenomenon took hold, and we had all these questions, and have we created a monster, and how can he generate such a following? The scary thing, as you observe, is the following, and it makes you realize that you take these kind of fascist themes and strains and racist assertions and crazy xenophobic supposed policy ideas.
And incitement to violence.
And incitement and violence.
That is a part of his appeal.
It gets very brown shirt, and what the scary thing is, come to discover, there's some percentage of the population that are wearing the brown shirts, and it's a pretty good number. But I question, do you really think that, you did email me, I went back, gosh, we go way back.
To 4 days ago.
And you were talking about...
Long-time listener, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
First-time caller.
First-time caller. You suggested that race would be more openly discussed in the campaign if there were more anchors of color, right? And if there were more prominent minority figures in the media.
You and Brooke do a great job, by the way, just parenthetically, of going for that story when it needs to be gone after.
Well, as long as we can find, Jewish academics to say it for us, because
that's not your problem. That's not what you do on your show, Bob. Give yourself some credit.
We're NPR. We have scholars. But look, the race has been at the center of this conversation. For most recently, in talking about Bernie and whether he really has momentum coming out of his Western primary victories, now that he has to face, I guess the code word is the industrial states.
All these black people don't have any jobs.
But that's what it means. Right. It means black people. And earlier, the angry white people. Hasn't it, do you really believe that race has been somehow untouched?
Well, with like sanitary gloves, you know what I mean? It's not we sort of dance around it. There are terms for this thing. That's kind of how we got into the situation in the first place, is what we now all collectively, culturally call Republican dog whistling. Mm-hmm. The use of that term is just, the proliferation of that term is sort of fascinating to me. Like, we couldn't hear it in 2007 or 2008, but we now know that all of the shorthand that was being used to talk about non-white people, immigration, Muslims, et cetera, was just like signaling to a certain kind of American voter that these were problems, and if only there were a candidate who would speak directly to those problems.
I mean, I think in some ways, I think it got mentioned on an earlier panel, like Donald Trump has done what I would consider a service to the Republican Party by laying bare what the real motivations and real language and real ideas were at the heart of some of their policies. You know, when he was asked about punishing women who get abortions, he just gave the logical right answer. You know,
Right.
When he talks about banning all Muslims, when he talks about Mexicans being racist, he's just saying the thing that's been implied for a long, long time. And I, for one, get upset about the Never Trump movement. I am upset about the idea the Republicans are going to pull something at the convention to keep him from getting nomination, because, like, you break it, you buy it. You know? Like, you broke your party, you get Donald Trump. You know, you should have to live with that.
Yeah, and exactly right. And I think to take that around to the media, and especially the early days of the Trump candidacy, when you're talking about we're finding our footing, what are we dealing with here? I think part of in this stew is there were lefties in the media, to put it bluntly, who were rooting for Donald Trump to cause chaos in or potentially destroy the Republican Party, especially through these things which had been under the surface. And they kind of regarded that idea with amusement. And he was never going to win, so it wasn't a big deal, but he was going to cause this crazy chaos through the debates and through the primaries. And then it happened. And then he got close to the nomination, and I think there was a little moment of, what if there's some, fluke and he gets into the Oval Office, But I think in the early days, I think lefties in the media thought it was a funny idea to him sort of torturing the Republicans with the issues, with blunt use of the issues they had used for years.
And I also think that that's also what led to like covering the outrage was the sort of the unconscious liberal bias of a lot of reporters was that if we show people how outrageous he is, certainly they'll figure it out. But it turns out that that does nothing.
No, and your point about self-correcting, we just don't have that kind of power. And we don't have the power to remove Donald Trump from the universe. Much as
Wait till that convention, my friends.
It reminds me a little bit of Palin in 2008. I had a lot of people come to me and say the media didn't do its job covering Sarah Palin. They dropped the ball. This woman, and you looked at her and she had terrible approval ratings. A paper came out and said she had dragged down the ticket more than any vice presidential nominee, I think, in history or recent history. And what the public was mad at the media about was we did not usher Sarah Palin out of public life before the election.
Which is not our job.
And nor could we do it if it were our job. We just can't do that.
But what you just said with Palin, and now maybe with Trump, and I think to a lesser degree Michelle Bachmann, and a few other, let's just say, very prominent ignoramuses or tinfoil hats
Herman
who have.
Cain.
I'm sorry.
Herman Cain.
Yeah, well.
Do you discount that?
I don't know. He had there was such a brief love affair with Herman Cain.
Yeah.
But I want to get back to this self-correcting thing, because maybe the way we handled Trump, and we, not us individually in our work, but the media as an institution was, more or less about right. We just kind of, we didn't do the due diligence that none of his followers are going to pay attention to anyway. We didn't vet his policy fantasies. We just let him be Donald, and he, I just saw a poll that says he's the least popular politician in the United States. And so maybe that's the way to go. But there's a way I want to ask you, another way to come around to this question, and that has to do with sort of the flip side of the problem, and that's the Bernie Sanders problem, who has made a career talking about being miscovered and undercovered by the corporate media, and he has some truly tinfoil hat ideas about how newsrooms work. But putting that aside, he argued correctly, and you can back it up with Andrew Tyndall numbers about the evening news and cable coverage, that he got during certain weeks 4% of the political coverage, and Trump was getting 60% and Hillary was getting 20 or whatever. I don't know if those numbers add up. But I've disclaimed any interest or understanding of data. I think I'm on the record there. And that, in a funny way, helped him build his insurgency. The very neglect is his calling card. No?
Yes.
Maybe, yes.
I mean, he presents his argument is true in the same, and it rings true for the people that are drawn to him in the same way that Donald Trump's argument rings true, although it's demonstrably false. I mean, like the people who are attracted to Bernie's story are attracted to his underdog narrative, and I do think earlier there was a reference to there is no they there in the parties. Because the parties are these enormous things that it's hard to give them a single consciousness. I think we need to also remember the media is also bigger than that now. Like, we have lots of different kinds of media, and to say that the media is responsible for anything or the media should do something differently, like, we've disclaimed it, we're not the blitherers. But that's also, we have jobs that allow us not to blither, that allow us to write in a way that I think is less like blithering.
There's some blathering right on the margins.
Yeah, but
the
some
blithering we keep
gibberish
to a bare-
occasionally.
yeah.
But there's the cable news outlets that cover things a certain way. There's ideologically driven outlets that cover things a certain way. I can't remember how I'm going to get back to Bernie, except that his grievance is somewhat. He has a legitimate grievance. He also was getting votes in numbers that Donald Trump, he was getting more votes than Trump at a time when we were giving him less coverage.
I would also say that he's at a disadvantage, right, given what his candidacy is based on. Mm-hmm. And if you're a person who has to write story after story after story of, like, suppose you're put on the Sanders campaign, you're gonna run out of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't want to harp on this.
On the second day.
Right, but, I'm saying this as objectively as I possibly can. I mean, even if you believe in Bernie Sanders' message, it is somewhat limited to a certain set of issues. And so in 5.
And he doesn't say stupid shit every day either.
Right.
He's not giving a story every day. Sorry
Exactly.
for the language.
Exactly.
And so
He's-
from the
his
standpoint,
very seriousness has very much retarded his campaign.
Yeah.
or the coverage of his campaign.
Yeah.
I mean, his campaign it gets stronger as it goes on, but that's a lot to do with the fact that he is concentrated on this one thing. And for whatever reason, you guys could probably answer this better than I can, the media is sort of looking for some sort of variegation among the platforms and policy suggestions from these candidates. And Trump is like a beat up pinata. He is raining crazy stuff all the time.
The never-ending beat-up pinata crazy.
I mean,
That's a good image for him. Yeah.
So do we have some sort of civic duty as journalists, apart from our obvious one of watchdogging the government, let's just say? Do we have civic duty when we recognize substance to try to figure out a way to give attention to Bernie's 5 points about campaign finance and banking and single-payer healthcare and universal free college and income disparity? I mean, I think that's the entire thing. That's one stump speech. Or do we just deliver all the goods to the candidate who's willing to say something stupid and obnoxious every single day, something new?
Well, we're not going to pick door number 2 in that in that choice. I think it's weird. I think all the points, but when I think of like 2 or 3 cycles back, there was especially on cable news, there was a big thing that if you ever deviated from the basic talking points of the Republican and Democratic parties, the party apparatus, you were seen as being very fringy. Mm-hmm. Since Obama got elected, I think people think more things are possible in elections now. I look at the CNN panel, I see Van Jones, a guy like that. I see this Jeffrey Lord guy who's representing Trump, and I have no clue who that is. And I even see people that are...
I see Van Jones eating Jeffrey Lord alive, which was awesome.
Also, yeah. When we see them in the same picture, it's even better. But I do think they represent Rick Wilson, who used to be Cruz's spokesman 5 minutes ago, is now on MSNBC. I think there's more of a range now on those things, or at least trying to think of bigger ideas than this is a Republican, this is a basic Democrat. And I don't think that's the enlightenment of cable news. I think the elections have pushed cable news that you have to. If you don't have somebody who is talking for Donald Trump, well, what's going on here?
So
right?
Is that good news, or is it just because the fringes have moved to the center?
Well, you know what a good answer for me is? To watch Fox News now and to see like that place, they have lost. They don't know what to do.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the saddest place on earth now.
Yeah, if you wanna see
it
it,
used to be
yeah.
the most exciting place on the planet, Fox News. Now it is like tear emojis all day.
It went from Disneyland to Dismal Land.
That's right. It's really, I mean, they really are at a loss of how to cover this election. That shine of I don't even know what it's like, entitled ownership of everything. That is gone.
Imagine
kinda
making
like-
Kelly's mascara running forever.
You invite all the kids to your birthday party, and it's all your party, and you've planned it and planned it and planned it, and they come, and they just tear the place up. And you're the birthday girl, and you're sitting there crying, this is supposed to be your party.
If you want to see a live existential crisis unfold, on national television, it is true. You can tune into Fox and Friends when they have Donald Trump on, and the faces of the anchors are just kind of frozen, mannequin-like.
Brian Kilmeade just doesn't know what to do. I mean, this is a different show, but they're all just like, what happened to us?
Yeah.
And this sort of brings me to how the convention is going to get covered, and what are they going to do at that convention?
And I should probably add here, though, that it's interesting to talk about Fox News or CNN and the diversity that's being represented there, but one has to remember very few people watch cable news. We do,
Yes.
because that's what we're interested, because we're nuts, we're weird, we're outliers. But where people are getting their news is not generally, cable news. And that's, to get back to the convention question, I will be very interested to see how non-traditional outlets cover the conventions.
Excuse me just one second here. I believe I am moderating this panel.
Oh.
Anna Marie, tell me about social media and other non-conventional outlets where people are actually, where the rubber hits the road, obtaining their news, if you would, if you're comfortable.
Okay, let me think about that for a minute. No, I think that it's good that you brought that up, Bob. Thank you. MTV News has just sort of relaunched itself. And so we've been thinking a lot about this problem and this opportunity for where young people engage with the news, where non-traditional news consumers, where will they find out about the stuff that's happening at the conventions? And is it going to be via Snapchat? Is it going to be via Twitter? And how can we give them news? How can we give them analysis that is not, that doesn't treat them like idiots, but comes to them on a platform where a lot of idiocy is taking place, And it's a serious question because that is where the conversation is happening. And I think that's where we have to go. I don't know. I think it means...
Have you thought about licensing John Oliver's show and just putting it on your...
Yeah, that we should just do that, sure. Except his bits are kind of long.
Just spitballing
Yeah.
here. They are long.
But what he has done actually has shown that there is an interest for long-form, in-depth discussion that needs to have kind of footnoted aspect to it. You're going to need to see it again. You're going to need to send it around to your friends. You don't. These aren't people who are watching that show don't fit the idea of someone who's just channel surfing or who just has a short attention span.
Mm-hmm. If you're really funny.
If you're really funny,
Right.
yeah.
Good luck, 30 minutes on prison reform if you're not really funny, right?
Right. I mean,
Which
it's
is not to say you shouldn't do 30 minutes on prison reform, but
yeah. Well, I mean,
the reason it's sent around is because he's funny and righteous and cathartic and all that stuff. Right?
and you have to do that too. Yeah. No, that's the secret is you can't just present it. You can't just do prison reform. Yeah.
Right.
You have to also make it funny and interesting and relevant to people's lives.
I would say though, John Oliver, I think late night, the aspect of punditry that enters into punditry that airs after the hours of 10 o'clock is interesting to me now because it's not funny anymore. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not saying that's bad, but it's not it's infrequently laugh out loud funny. I think the comedy is sort of in the format and not necessarily in the content. So John Oliver can be funny, but I've noticed with him, a lot of what's funny about him is not necessarily the delivery of the jokes. It's usually parentheticals and tangents and expletives. Mm-hmm. The substance of the things that he is talking about are entirely journalistic and only slightly editorial.
He's an
but not
investigative
at all,
comedian.
Right,
Yeah.
but not at all funny. The same is true for Larry Wilmore. The same is true for this iteration of Colbert, who I think, frankly, is still, he might be better on CBS in this version of himself as himself than he was on Comedy Central. I don't think he's as, I know I'm gonna go to hell for saying that, but I mean, and the ratings probably don't reflect it and people aren't watching, but when you watch him talk to people, and some of the jokes he makes about the campaigns are deadly devastating.
Yeah. I would add Sam B also.
Samantha Bee, but she actually is funny. Although, like just straight up funny. The third episode was not funny, but I think comedy now can get away with the righteousness that you aren't getting in other cable formats, in cable news formats, or nightly news formats.
So it never occurred to me to talk about Colbert in this panel, but since you brought it up, the difference between what he had before was they had a small, not insignificant, but relatively small cable audience of self-selecting people who were politically simpatico with him. And now he has the great, the middle American late night TV audience. So is it possible that Colbert will, by being not just obsessively neutral, but by actually giving his point of view, his clearly progressive point of view, to the whole nation, that he will have an impact at least as strong as the employers who are macing their employees from the last panel?
I don't know.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. I think he probably has turned people off, if anything. I mean, he's probably cost the Late Show viewers.
And I think people who don't agree with, people who might, middle Americans who, I live in middle America, by the way, but it's not a strange foreign country, but I think there is a group of people who watch CBS late night who are just used to tuning out the politics of the people that appear on television, who are enjoying, who like Ellen, who like Colbert as a late night, as CBS late night, but are used to just being like, yeah, but I'm not going to agree with that person.
I think we have this fantasy every 4 years that an entertainer we like already is going to swing the election. Remember when Howard Stern won the election for John Kerry? Yeah. Right? That was highlighted in 2004 because he was talking about John Kerry every day, and this is it. He's going to get all these voters. It doesn't happen. I don't think people vote that way. I
think that, to get back to the other questions, perhaps a bigger influence will be social media.
I was going to say, I mean, you take a lot of the things that we're talking about with these, that I'm bringing up with these late night comedians are also things that get passed around. And so the virality of some of these rants, I mean, from like Larry Wilmore's or Trevor Noah's or John Oliver's or Samantha Bee's, I mean, any one of these people, you know, can those bits can get passed around. I'm not saying they have any effect on how people vote, but they definitely have the potential to create awareness.
And the campaigns are doing their best, like the White House has been doing for 7 years, to use social media to do an end around the likes of us, right? And the White House's operations are very successful, very sophisticated, kind of infuriating, but
More than kind of.
Yeah.
More than kind of, and they're actually, you know, they a couple cycles ago they were like dad coming down and to the kids' party and trying to talk like the kids and wearing baggy pants with his underwear showing and stuff and just making a fool of himself. Now they're frighteningly, they know what they're about.
Oh, they've taken over our job. Obama's now an interviewer. Obama's now a journalist. I mean, like, he's like interviewing Marianne Robinson. Like, he's interviewing David Simon. Like, he's doing the jobs that we would do. You know, they're really, really good at that. Like, they don't need us, like, quite literally. They don't.
How much time do we have? 10 minutes. Let's go back to prognostication for a second, because I don't think it would be right for us to leave today before, you know, humiliating at least some of us in public. So, one thing that we are terrible about, again, as a class, is predicting the future.
So let's do it.
Let's look back at the Hall of Shame. There are people out there, Bill Kristol right at the top of the list, George Will, Paul Begala, James Carville, who make a living, and a rather healthy one, making predictions on cable television, which are just magnificently terrible, time after time after time. What's his name? Frank? Oh my goodness! Don't ever become a senior American. Wheelchair.
Oh, Krauthammer.
Charles Krauthammer. He is it's almost majestic in his wrongness, but he did get one right I want to share with you because it's really fantastic. Hold on. I'm all out of order here. Oh, gosh. This will be worth the wait, I swear. That which more or less means that it can't. No, I cannot locate it. Well, yeah, I will. I'll give you the capsule version. He said in 2012 that Donald Trump would run for president. And he said he's going to run a gracious, forthright, and respectful campaign. And that's how he will do the same in office, something like that. So, give him points for predicting it right. Gracious, courteous, and a serious candidate and a serious man. So he'll lose some style points. But we've all made Krauthammerian mistakes. And you guys, I've combed through every word you've written. You two, on the ends, did very well. Anna Marie, I've got some tweets provided to me by you. I'm just going to read them aloud. The establishment Republicans will rally behind a candidate, you tweeted.
Yeah.
He doesn't speak the language of the evangelical voter, you tweeted. True on the facts, but not on its implications. Veterans will see right through him. Not apparently. He doesn't have a real infrastructure or ground game. You can't win without making significant ad buys. His negatives are too high to get very far.
I provided these. I just
We're talking about Marco Rubio, right?
Yeah.
How dare you?
I know.
But I'm going to make this right. I'm going to make this good. But first, just tell me, how do we constantly get ourselves in a position of, we're not stupid. We pay very close attention.
I was listening to everyone, all the people we've talked to who's talked before. I mean, I wasn't alone in making these kinds of arguments. That doesn't excuse me. I just like to have company. I mean, I will say that also, I'm just going to fess up that I wanted to believe that.
Yes.
I mean,
That's the biggest part about political predictions
Yeah.
that are not made by Nate Silver.
Yeah.
You'll find that all the wrong ones are things we really hope comes true.
Yeah.
Charles Krauthammer really did hope that Donald Trump would run a serious campaign and hit all these buttons and issues and not be a complete joke, right? I remember Ross Douthat said that.
Marco Rubio, we'll all be sorry.
Hold on. That's my little
I'm not
Easter
stealing
egg.
material.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, but there's that. But I think, do you want to show that?
Yeah, let's just show that. Amber, you're off the hook.
Okay.
Because if anyone thought that you had somehow were unperspicacious,
This is a classic of the forum, I think.
It is. Look at the retweets. Most of those are for within the last month, probably. Yeah.
When you maybe he thought that.
You okay, buddy, is my favorite.
I don't think he is, by the way. I don't think Ross is okay.
It's his most popular tweet. I mean, it's amazing, right?
and he still has his column.
Yeah.
He hasn't lost his job. There is no penalty whatsoever for that.
Nor should there be.
Should there be?
Nor should there be at all. There's no connection. Again, this isn't an analytics panel, so I'm not talking about Nate or the various Nates or anybody getting things wrong. maybe they shouldn't be getting lots of things wrong. I see no connection at all between being a good political journalist or pundit and being able to predict the events of elections any more than a sports writer is a bad sports writer if they didn't know the Broncos were going to win the Super Bowl with rag arm Peyton Manning this year.
Yeah.
I don't see any connection to that at all. And I think this is one of those things that proves it. Just what I was saying. Why do we make predictions like this? Because we're not looking at data. We want to find a lane, right? Mm-hmm. Saying Donald Trump is going to win in the middle of Trump mania isn't very interesting. Saying Marco Rubio is going to win, ooh, that's a lane, right? That's a thing. And also, maybe he hoped Marco Rubio.
Sure, no. Well, I mean, to continue with the sports metaphor, nobody remembers your layups, but they do remember your 65-foot shots with one arm as the buzzer's expiring. That's what that was, and if he had hit it, he would be on Mount Rushmore.
Right.
But we never hit it.
Yeah.
We always miss it. We're over 7,000 on those 65-foot last-second buzzer beaters. So is it malpractice to even be in that business?
For what it's worth, those are all I only try to shoot the buzzer beaters in practice, like in Twitter. Like I never wrote a column that said any of that stuff. The column I wrote a column that quoted all of that when I wrote right before the Iowa primaries. I believe the exact opening was, "Hey guys, Trump might win this."
Yeah.
And I was like, it was like this column written pre-Iowa, and I went to my editor and I was like, "Look, I have a kind of risky column I want to write. I think Trump might get the nomination." And he's like, "I guess if you can prove it, you know." And
Wait, hold on, let me get my time machine. I'll be right back.
and basically my argument was, tell me the first state he'll lose.
You called my attention to these.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is not something that I'm not like Joe McCarthy in my hand I have. No. And moreover, you wrote this line, which I think is just so fantastic. You did examine the kind of larger meaning of the Sanders and Trump insurgencies. And I think from my money, you got to the nub of it, that it has nothing to do with their specific policy notions. It has to do with that they are not the man. They are both from their different sides running against the man. And you said, but the attraction of, this is how you ended that piece, but the attraction of a Sanders or Trump presidency for true believers isn't the opportunity to govern all of us, but the chance to punish the rest of us. National politics as Schadenfreude, and it's that was magnificent. So,
Thank you. All right, saved me. All right, bad tweets, good line at the end of the
But listen, Miss Social Media, there's no difference between Twitter and your column on MTV.
That's right.
They're all the media.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We probably have time for one or two questions from the floor, have we not? All right. So let's do that. Oh, I don't want no part of this process.
Yeah. We're all about empowering everyone, like, you know, yeah.
So my question kind of is, like, do you think Trump was kind of able to beat the media in that he built what, let me walk this back. Romney releases that documentary after he loses, and people are like, wow, if this came out before, people would know Romney. He's not so much of a robot. We know him on a personal level. But for Bryan and Wesley, like, it's weird for me to be here. Like, I've heard you guys on multiple podcasts. I follow you on Twitter. Like, when Wesley sat down behind me, I was like, oh, I know him. And then I have to remind myself, he doesn't know who you are. But, like, we have this weird
Hi.
Yeah. But, like, I have this weird personal relationship with you. But, like, Trump, you know what?
Hi.
How weird.
Trump basically does the same thing. You know, he just tweets his thoughts. He goes on every show that's willing to take him. He just speaks off the cuff. You ask him a question, he doesn't answer, and then he doesn't answer your question. He says what you're thinking, and like maybe he was just able to. Is it possible he just beat the media and he's just able to connect with voters outside of any normal realm that punditry is able to control?
I don't know if it's media beating though. This is the thing for me. Like again, not to repeat myself, but I mean, okay, I think he ran for president kind of as a joke. I think he maybe wanted to see how far he could get. But I just, like, there was a night maybe it was one of those Super Tuesdays, where he actually was at, not this Trump stakes on the podium night, but some other victory speech where he just, maybe it was the same night, where he just said, I don't know how this is happening. How is this happening? I don't know. I don't know if beating the media is really, I mean, I think like I said, I think there's a way in which the media doesn't know what to do with him. But I don't think he's really brilliant at all as a candidate.
But I think weird personal
It's all an
relationship.
accident.
Yeah.
I think we all have a weird personal relationship
With Wesley?
with Wesley and Donald Trump too. I think that's a pretty good phrase, because I think you do feel like you know him in this way that you don't know the other candidates.
Right.
By the way, Bernie Sanders, you were talking about earlier, the media's ignored me. Some guy from Politico tweeted, I've been trying to get an interview with Bernie Sanders for like 9 months and his press shop is, shutting me out. Whereas
Yeah.
Donald Trump's available all the time, so so much for that, right? If you want to be known by reporters, it's probably good to put yourself in front of reporters.
Yeah, I think Wesley's right as far as like, I agree that the Donald Trump beat the media is probably the wrong way to think about it. But I do think that one metaphor that I've used before is that it's like an open mic for all the media, or live mic. Hot mic. We've gotten caught talking behind the scenes. We've been caught trying to make things up as we go along. You know, usually the kinds of decisions and narrative building that happen in newsrooms and over drinks and kind of on campaign buses that don't necessarily, it's not like a backroom actual control of the narrative, but it's the conversation that kind of happens as the narrative is getting built. That's all we don't know. We don't know anymore. And
Also,
people are kind of having to make it up as they go along, which is probably healthy.
He's making it up as he goes along. There's no strategy here. It's just like, whatever.
Yeah.
It really, I mean, no one has ever seen anything like this, but I don't know. I find he's being given more agency, I think, than he actually has.
Yes.
I think all of this is, I mean, talk about a grassroots movement. This is like the best example of that. Mm-hmm. He is the people who are voting for him. Mm-hmm. That's all he is. Yeah. If those people go away, then he doesn't exist. I mean, I guess that's true for any politician, but he really doesn't exist, right? Like, because he's got the people are his platform.
He had best-selling books before this. This is not.
Yeah, he won't stop talking about those either.
Donald Trump has been popular in America.
But I take your point. In some ways, it's like electing Joe the plumber to be the president.
We were talking about this last night. Yeah. Joe the plumber, like, created Donald Trump. Yeah. Like, he was Donald Trump 1.0 or 0.5. Yeah. I don't know. This just seemed totally inevitable to me. Yeah. Sorry.
Anyway.
I was going to remark on. I think Donald Trump's. There was an earlier reference to him as the Hertz, and the others as Avis and Budget and National Car Rentals. The thing is, they all think alike. Those car companies. They all sell at airports. They all rent by the day. He's more like Zipcar, where he's the complete opposite of everything they do, which is the very definition of creative thinking. So it's kind of like this perfectly creative strategy to just take the opposite of whatever custom dictates. He's going to just do the opposite, and it really resonates with just like any. And then it tends to spread into other, and they're copycats, and it changes policy. Those creative ideas are like that.
And it's as if his executive team at Zipcar said, "Yeah, and we're going to make ours the cleanest, lowest mileage, best operating cars in the entire category." And he says, no, we're going to fill them with litter. We're going to dismantle the master cylinder.
The gas light is on when you pick it up.
The gas light will be on when they pick up the car.
And nobody's going to complain.
And to continue the metaphor, the really terrifying thing about Trump is he won't be the last. Right? Yeah. There will be imitators.
There will be all the imitators.
So we're going to see, I've been heartened by Bernie Sanders' relative success, because to me it opens up the left side of the political spectrum, and we might get more people who identify to the left of the mainstream Democratic Party running. But you know what? Like, that part of the Republican Party that was too polite to say the stuff that Donald Trump is saying, and I guess they probably don't feel like they need to be polite anymore. So.
And then there'll be a paradigm shift, just like when any new creative idea, in the mainstream way of thinking.
Yeah.
Hopefully not, but I think that could happen.
Oh, hi, Perry.
Just a question for the four of you. I read a lot of media criticism. Who is covering the election well? Who do you read and think, this helps me understand what's going on? I'm just curious, any kind of beyond MTV and the New York, I mean, it even like names some writers or some publications that are doing something that are helping you understand Trump or Hillary or something that's doing well.
I think this is interesting because I think the Trump thing has scrambled the election media in a way. Like, I think Byron York, writes for the DC Examiner, was kind of onto the Trump phenomenon before anybody else, right? And certainly in a way, so I find myself reading his columns because he was there first and he kind of figured it out first, right? Do you have others that are this cycle?
The conservative media has done a good job of covering Trump, I think, in general. I think the Federalist has been really interesting. I think they're kind of hilarious in their outrage, but our friend John Ward at Yahoo, I think, has been covering the evangelical right really, really well, doing a lot of solid reporting there. I think Molly Ball at The Atlantic has been great. She's probably one of my favorites. I am trying to think who else. You, Wesley?
I mean, you took one of mine, Molly Ball. I think is. I mean, I don't want to. I want to just read about. I've made this point before, but I mean, I'm more interested in the voters than I am in the candidates.
I recommend John Ward stuff to you.
Okay, then Bob.
I'm like Dalton Trumbo. I don't name names, but I am so in love with Gail Collins, and you know, I think she's managed to have her way with him without like really trivializing the underlying issues of what he represents, and so it's, you know, I wouldn't call it the most granular analysis, but she so gets it.
I also want to put a shout out for Jason Lincolns at the Huffington Post, who does their Eat the Press column. I think he's largely under the radar, but he's really great media critic and hilarious. And their podcast that they do, So That Happened, is one of my favorite, often profane podcasts, political podcasts, media criticism and political podcasts.
One of the things that has kind of baffled me is how surprised everyone is by what's going on. And when I step back, I kind of think, you know, maybe it doesn't surprise me because I grew up in rural East Texas and I grew up with Trump fans. So what that's made me think, since now I work in media, is, you know, is media a little bit city-centric? Has it gotten a little bit too homogenous?
A little bit. I mean,
Maybe that's a piece of what we're seeing here.
You know, Jim Fallows went out on this expedition to sort of undo some of the damage of the coastal concentration of media. And, you know, he went to San Bernardino, he went to South Dakota, he went to the outskirts of Detroit. He went to places where middle America is, and not just in the middle of America, but places that are not the centers of media culture, and to do exactly that process. And I think it's a lesson for all of us that that you can't just pull some people out of a rally because of their obnoxious T-shirts and then match it up with some dubious poll data with a 17% margin of error and think you understand the electorate. You can't, and maybe that's one of our big takeaways. However, it's got to be our last one. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, CAP.